La rose l'important, c'est la rose l'important, c'est la rose comme toi qui cherches quelqu'un toutes la semaine dans la ville, tu promènes ton brave casque le soleil couchant qui passe devant les banques si tu n'es que certains banques l'important, c'est la rose l'important, c'est la rose l'important, c'est la rose. Pas petit que tes parents ont laissé ça sur la terre, petit oiseau sans lumière, sans argent. Ça reste drap blanc, tu as froid, comme on aime, et t'as le cœur en carême, et pourtant, l'important, c'est la rose l'important, c'est la rose l'important, c'est la rose comme moi. Toi pour qui donnant donnant, j'ai chanté ces quelques lignes comme pour t'avoir un signe en passant. À ton tour maintenant que la vie n'a d'importance que par une fleur qui danse sur la France. C'est la rose l'important, c'est la rose l'important, c'est la rose pour moi. L'important, c'est la rose l'important, c'est la rose l'important, c'est la rose.
Hey everyone, welcome to October. I had to look up. It's so fun to see you all showing up. And we're coming at you live from Paris, France, only in my dreams. Thanks for Zoom props. But it has been busy here this morning in Paris. Anyway, it is absolutely so much fun to see you all, but also to have Joy Eggerichs Reed joining us this morning.
Hello.
This evening in her part of the world. Joy, it's fun to see you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you live, your family, and I also want to know what took you to Paris and how you're serving the CIA over there.
That's my dream. Truly, I've told my husband, I'm like, if they asked, I would say yes. So secret's out. I will say your background is false advertising because I have an actual window view of Paris and it is downpouring and gray and cold. So no springtime
My world
in Paris.
has never rained.
My name is Joy. I see some of my friends on here. Callie, Dave, hello. This is an honor to be here. And yes, people do ask why I'm in Paris. And as a literary agent that primarily serves authors in the US. But my husband and I got married later in life, and we were living in Portland, Oregon. And we thought, well, we were dating, and I talk about this in my book where I say that, I found out when we were dating that he worked for a company that was based in Paris, and I was very shallow and said, if you get a job in Paris, I will marry you. And thankfully I said yes to marrying him before he got the job transfer. But yeah, we were like, hey, all of our friends that got married in their 20s and, had so much time on the odometer before they started having kids and whatnot, we felt like we had this very small window. And so we were like, let's just do an adventure for like a year or two. And 7.5 years and 3 kids later, we're still here in Paris. And Dawn still speaks more French than I do, which is the embarrassing truth. But I love living here. I like to say that I speak the cultural language, which people always say, Parisians or French people are so rude. But there's actually, just some rules that you need to know when you're here. So if you are traveling to to France, I highly recommend the book, The Bonjour Effect. And that will ensure that French people are nice to you.
C'est bon ça. Um, what what was the genesis of Punchline, and how did that evolve from a speakers bureau to
Mhm.
a European-based literary agency?
Yeah. Well, so at that time, when my husband and I were dating and then got married and we're talking about moving to France, I was kind of in a season of transition. I had worked for my parents who have a marriage ministry for well over a decade, and that kind of evolved from me coordinating their, marriage conferences into going through heartbreak and deciding that I wanted to help my generation with their relationships. And so I turned into like a blogger and a vlogger and a speaker. And so that was kind of my world. And so I got to know people in the events industry, other speakers. And so when I was in this season of what's next for me, because I kind of felt like I had said all I needed to say on the topic of dating and all of that, um, he got this job transfer and I felt like I needed to do something. And at the time I was still managing my dad's speaking engagements and I was his literary agent just kind of on the side. And so I had other people asking, could you represent me as a speaker? And so I just kind of decided like, let's do this. So I have something to do while in France. And that's my excuse for not having learned the language. That I launched a company 1 week before moving abroad, and I don't recommend doing that. But I started a speaking agency, and then, as I said, I represented my dad as a literary agent as well. And so it just kind of evolved because a lot of the speakers that I represented were either getting offered book deals, and there's just so much that goes in hand today. Especially in the nonfiction arena, or even in fiction, if you've written a really successful book, you're probably going to be asked to speak. And if you are a speaker and you're really successful, you're probably going to be asked to potentially write a book. So they kind of went together. I did just hand off the speaking agency side of Punchline because it was starting to become so managerial. And what I've realized through life coaching and different, being in my 40s now and really figuring out what am I good at, it's really working with communicators. So I love public speaking as a communication platform, and so I actually like working with speakers to help them develop a keynote or give them feedback on their communication style. And the literary agent aspect of it is it's just a network I've created, as you guys know from working with Dawn. You want to find a literary agent that knows your project, and has connections with the right editors at the right publishing houses to be an advocate for you. And so I like taking people from A to Z. So whether that's like they have an idea and they want to craft a keynote, or they have a book idea and they want to get it into the hands of a publisher or to independently publish, that's what I do. So we eventually started an imprint for people who are independently publishing. So people who either want to get a book out quickly for time constraints, or they just don't want to sell their rights to a traditional publisher, but they still want a brand and they still want someone like an agent to tell them what to do and hold them through the process. We've done that. So Punchline just continues to evolve as I see a need in the market. And as Dawn can attest, the publishing industry is the wild, wild west, and there's just so many different ways to get your words into the world. And so that's Punchline. That's how it started, and that's how it's evolved, and that's where it is currently today.
What you talked about this just a moment ago, the process of coaching writers in helping them as representing them. What do you see the biggest need that your writers have to develop as you're working with the writers that come to you?
Yeah, so we, Amelia, my colleague, she's a developmental editor, and I'm kind of a person that likes to make a plan and tell people how to do things. And so because I have 3 kids right now, and I'm in a season where I'm like, okay, I can only traditionally represent a fraction of how many people Dawn can manage and cheer on. But that first part, that like question mark of like, how do I even do a proposal? How do I even take this idea and get it, clearly laid out in a table of contents and chapter summaries and things like that, which an agent and a publisher will need to see. But even besides that, it's so clarifying for an author that I've developed this kind of 30-day writing cohort that we take people through. So me as the agent and just kind of, understanding marketing and different things like that. And then Amelia as the developmental editor. But I would say Amelia and I were actually just talking about this today because we have a cohort going right now. And we kind of see these two obstacles that people are usually falling into one of these two camps. And the one is someone who really is a writer for the artistic craft of writing. And they are like, I hate this world of marketing. I hate that I have to tell people about it. All I want to do is write. This is what I was designed to do. And then you've got these other people who really have had an idea or, are communicating that idea. And now they want to get this into a book format. And they don't really know how to take the words that they speak and can communicate with, nonverbals and nuance and, a look of an eye or whatever, and get it onto the page in a way that feels literary. We see that over and over as people are writing how they're talking, which is a very, like, if you have that skill and you can do it well, that's amazing. But a lot of people can't. And so their pages that they're writing, we really have to work on that. So those are the two obstacles that I feel like I see the most.
Yeah, that's good. And some of you are probably wondering, Don, you're an agent. What on earth are you doing having another agent on here? Well, truth be told, we're all in this together, actually. And some of you who are on here actually have been referrals from Joy to me. And just so you know, we're colleagues in the business, and Joy and I communicate often. Well, not often, but enough times throughout the year. I don't know. Do you want to talk about that? Because we tend to be very territorial in publishing, but we have a fun rhythm, I think.
Yeah, I mean, our history, I mean, you could tell our origin story. I don't know if we have enough time for all of that, but Don is someone
It
I have
involved bacon and a donut.
That's how we do it in Portland. We love bacon on our maple donuts. So yes, Don and I met in Portland many, many years ago, and he's just someone in the industry that I have respected for a long time. He said worn so many different hats, as I'm sure you all know. And yeah, I mean, I definitely like I said, you have a certain, as an agent, you have a Rolodex of contacts with editors that you work with. And when I sometimes get proposals from people that I'm like, I don't think I know the right editors for this. And Don really, he just knows everybody and everything. So you guys are all in very good hands being with Don. And so, yeah, I'll be like, here, this is the person to go to. And it's just not the way I operate to be like super secretive about stuff. We even have, Don and I have like a shared spreadsheet that we can both go in with context, because I will tell you, in the publishing industry, keeping track of where every editor is working is a full-time job in and of itself. They all move around to different, some of you I know are already published authors. Probably many of you have experienced being in the middle of writing your book and your editor says, I'm sorry, I'm handing you off to another editor because I got a job at another publishing house. And so we have to keep track of that. And we have to, be the emotional support for you, the writer, when you hear that news. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think Don and I kind of run in a similar fashion, in that we're just like, hey, rising tides raise all boats. Let's just help each other out. And I have been so, so grateful for your help in this journey.
Yeah, talk to us about your role being an agent based in France and pitching to this ever revolving group of editors in the US market. And even just kind of being aware of not only the revolving door and who's going where, but also trends and all those kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you're far more of an expert on trends in publishing than I am. I'm like, ooh, this book sounds exciting to me. And oh, I know an editor that I could probably get a book deal for this person on. Or if Punchline Publishers, I'm excited about what this person's doing. They seem like they'd be fun to work with. And we just get it out there. I think that, I primarily work in the US. I'm starting to become, I have even Dave on here. I represent his wife, Leah. And she was my first UK based author. And now I have three, but they are all authors who have a large audience in the US. And so, while I'm not involved in the French publishing industry at all. I can't speak or read the language. But what I know, one of my dear friends here, her father is a very famous French author, and I know that it operates very differently. I mean, American publishing is a machine. I know based off of what I hear from, well, the relationships I'm starting to build in the UK publishing industry is that even though American advances are going down and down, as Don and I can attest to, they're still significantly larger than, a UK based publisher, unless you're John Grisham or something. But America is just kind of the beast of publishing. The downside to that is because of these huge, oftentimes global imprints. If they see an imprint, and I think you all know an imprint, is this little thing here. All of these imprints you can lead back, except for a handful of ones that have stayed strong and on their own, get acquired by the bigger imprints like a Simon & Schuster or Harper Collins. And so that has created a bit of a monopoly. It is difficult in that sense because it reduces competition. But now, traditional publishers like the Simon & Schuster, the Penguins, things like that, they are starting to, I think, freak out a little bit because there's so many ways that people can get their book into the world on their own.
Yeah.
So I kind of think that while self-publishing used to be, you go into Kinko's and print off your books and hand it to your family and friends, that's a totally different, there are so many different ways to publish, not even just print on demand, but and I hope it's okay that I'm saying this, Don. I mean, I think you agree.
Yeah,
I do think there's going to get to a point where I feel like even with the HarperCollins, all those different publishing industries, where as authors, you will pay them for their services. So it is changing. And so just keep an eye on that, but know that because it's changing, it is kind of the wild, wild west. And depending on what it is that you want to do, your why behind writing this book, there is an avenue for you to do it.
Yeah, that's good. And there is, I mean, I just was reading about the Frankfurt Book Fair that's going on right now, and Simon & Schuster is looking at the international market, where before they were just focused in New York and doing America. Now I think they've acquired a French company, a Dutch company, and so on. Speak to that too, because I know in France, for example, the book industry is seen as a cultural icon, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that presented a problem for, I think, Amazon, because they can't come in and discount books. Books are protected in some form or fashion, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you probably know more than I do, but an example that I hope I'm okay to share, I won't say the name. A very famous author that many of you probably have heard of. She's had multiple New York Times bestselling books. I do not represent her. I wish that I did. But she was in Paris and we had mutual friends. And so we got together and she's like, and I was ironically with my dear friend who's French and her father's a famous French artist or author. And she was talking about how she spent all day with a French editor who was like, no, we're not going to acquire your book because we don't think that it will translate to the French audience. And she's like, but do you see the numbers? Like, do you see what my book has done? And they didn't want it. They did not want it. So I don't know. Maybe she needs to read the Bonjour effect. I don't know. But it was, first of all, I was like, why isn't your agent advocating for this? But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Like one thing, there's like the same style for many of the books. Do you know what I'm talking about, Don? Where they're white with kind of like an orange. So yeah,
a generic look.
And there's just a lot of regulations in France in general. I mean, Amazon really wasn't even happening when I first moved here. And then probably the last few years, it's kind of been, I felt like I was the only person getting Amazon deliveries. And I felt bad about that because there's still very much a tradition of like, you go to each kind of curated little store, you go to the shoe store to get your shoes, you go here to get, which I love. But I've seen an escalation in Amazon and even what they have available, but what they have available here is still a fraction of what is available in America. So I think that has to do again with a lot of the regulations.
Yeah. Talk to me, this wasn't a question I sent you, but it just occurred to me. When you get someone sending you something, what is it that says to you? Is it the pretty pictures in the proposal, the doilies that they send with the sprinkles that fall out of the envelope? What is it that appeals to you when you get an author approaching you?
Being personal and telling me why. So I would use that example even for as you're pitching to different publishing houses, if you can make a video and show people who you are, why Don's pitching you to this publishing house. I'm just, as an agent, I am helping you take this, basically this, and I hate saying this, but it's the, I think, clearest picture, this business plan of your book. Like, you wouldn't walk into a bank and say, hey, give me a loan. I'm not going to tell you why, but I just want a business loan. Give it to me. They're going to want to know about your business plan. And again, as a true artist and a writer, that feels very salesy, but it's also put yourself in their shoes. They're making an investment to buy something, to invest their time and efforts. It's a risk for them. And so you want to sell this. A lot of times people will say, well, I don't want to give away my best material either online or in my proposal. I don't want to give away the best stuff. And I say, no, some of my best deals for authors are for authors who have basically given away the entire book, whether on Substack or Instagram. And that has created a hunger and a feeling of appreciation from their audience, that then when it's all compiled in a book and you say like, hey, would you buy my book? Of course they want to. They know you. They know your message. They know how it's impacted their life. And so the same thing with, as you pitch to, well, you guys have an agent, but I say for people who are pitching to an agent, I've received proposals where, I got one that was just very, it was disorganized. And that communicates something to me. If you're this disorganized in pitching your book to me, you are going to be a lot of work for me. You're not going to follow the instructions I give you. You're not going to get things done on time for a publisher. And I hate having to tell a publisher that you aren't hitting your deadline. That's more work for me. Like, I want people who are going to honor their word. And so I got one proposal once where there was like notes about me and my family at the end. Not that I cared that they knew about me and my family, but it was like they hadn't taken time to like clean up the document and really give it a one over. And I didn't even read the proposal because I was just like, that's sending me a message. So be organized, be clear, and show that you've really put in the effort to put this proposal together.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I have one more question for you, but I'm going to hold it after you all have a chance to ask Joy some questions. Aaliyah, I see your hand up. Go ahead with unmuting yourself and asking the question. She's joining us from the Pacific Northwest, as it happens.
Ooh.
So Joy, I'm a Portlander by birth and have come back here, but my dream is to live in France. So you're living the dream. I lived there in my early 20s for a bit. I really enjoyed it. But yeah, I had a question. You were talking about all the imprints kind of being sucked up by some of these bigger imprints. I have a friend who's an acquisitions editor for one of the big five, and he says he's constantly outbid by Amazon. And I just was curious, both for you and for Don, if you're seeing that with your authors, and what your thoughts are on that.
When you say outbid, you mean like the royalty rate?
Yeah, so he's lost several authors recently because Amazon just offered such a huge chunk of money to the author and the agent. And so even though he's in, kind of the big five, he wasn't able to offer a competitive advance, etc. I don't know all of the details, but just that was a little troubling to me, and I wondered what that looked like on your.
Yeah, well, I'll quickly say my thoughts, and then Don probably has more insight. But I think it's just kind of like people can get very excited about what Amazon offers because they do offer a bigger portion of the book proceeds. So whereas you might be getting $1 or $2 royalty off of the sale of a book with a traditional publisher, depending on how long your book is, what quality of paper you choose on Amazon, all these different features, you can end up making $5 or $6 a book. And so when you do the math and think, oh, wow, that's a lot. The difference is people need to factor in, and this, as your friend, as a publisher, I'm sure he's saying this, but it's the money up front that the author has to pay to get that book on Amazon. So you're going to have to pay probably several $1,000s to a designer and a typesetter. You're going to have to pay money to an editor. You're going to have to pay money to marketing if you want to do marketing. And so there's all these things that if you want a team to come around you, now a lot of people here who have traditionally published might go, well, I had to do all the marketing myself. So if you have that money on the front end, you have a platform and an audience, it's a very viable option. It's just how motivated are you? That's why we did Punchline Publishers, because there's so many people who want to go that route, but they're also like, I still need someone to tell me what to do. But yeah, I mean, I think that's why my prediction is that this publishing model is going to change, because I believe friends like yours who work at an imprint of these big fives are going to go, you know what, we have the infrastructure, we have the team, we have all these people. Maybe instead of this advance model, what we actually need to do is get rid of the advance and just come up with more of a profit sharing model. And that's where I think it's going to head.
And you've seen that with Authors Equity that launched this summer with Madeline McIntosh, who is my colleague when I was at Random House, who's left Random House to go do that, where the advances aren't that big, but it's the shared revenue model. And I guess the other thing I would say about Amazon that's a challenge, I know a number of, I think Dean Koontz is there at Thomas and Mercer, and there's some other authors that have gone to Amazon. The challenge, as I understand it, with Amazon, I think you were talking about Amazon imprints, right? Because I think the challenge that I have heard just with the indies is that you can publish with Amazon and have the opportunity to have it go out through Amazon online and distribution that way. But the bugaboo is going to be the independent bookstores aren't going to order your book because Amazon is the competition. So, for example, I know an author who just signed with Lake Union Publishing, got a good deal, but all the indies that are part of MPIBA or PNBA or whatever, they're just saying, well, we're not going to bring her in because we don't want to support the competition, the revenue, give them the revenue kind of thing. So this is a challenge. Kyle, I see your hand up, or yeah, your hand. Go ahead.
I tried my hardest to do the hand thing on the screen, but I couldn't figure it out because I'm not very intelligent. So I apologize. This is my first session, by the way. It's so nice to meet all of you, and thank you for joining this session and teaching us a bunch of things. So I have kind of an out of the box question because this is my first book that I'm trying to get to market. I bring a weird background because I'm a podcaster and I podcast about movies, and I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm very weird, but I also wrote a book. And I'm constantly thinking of like creative ways to aid the process, right? But there's also like, because Don and I had to talk about like you can't give away parts of your book. There's all kinds of things you can't do because you will eliminate possibilities to you during the process of getting a book to market, working with your agent. What are some of the most creative things you can do without maybe eliminating those possibilities? I'm pretty savvy with social media and podcasting and all those things, and I'm constantly thinking like, what's a creative way to utilize these platforms during the process to maybe help the agent in getting attention and possibly selling your book?
Do you want to respond to that, Don? Or because maybe we have different opinions. I've never had a publisher, to me, giving away a lot of the content helps. And the only thing, so like I did a cookbook, and it was just like, okay, a certain percentage of the book needs to be new recipes. But that was the only kind of requirement. It was how much she had given away that led to a strong book deal. And then I would say, like, I work with, if you follow Scott the Painter online, he's one of my authors. And I mean, it's so much of what's online is in his books. That's his process. That's his artistic process, or Substack or things like that. So I just haven't had any publishers push back on that, but Don's probably had more experience. So tell me where I'm wrong, Don.
I wonder if it isn't a category by category thing. Like the fiction thing, like I wonder if it's nonfiction versus fiction. Because I think with fiction you can put out there your characters or a storyline that may not be in the novel.
Yeah.
But you could give too much away that someone would see it and say, oh, I'm going to write a novel based on those characters I just read about on Instagram, versus the cookbook or the psychologist or therapist or whatever person who's putting information out, just whetting your appetite, and you go, oh, I wonder if he has a book, like leadership tips or something like that. So
Yeah.
I tend to be more cautious only because I have several stories in my career where, an author went to an event, shared a little bit about the story, and then I had to subsequently cancel their book deal because someone who she shared with took that idea and ran with it and got a book deal elsewhere.
Wow.
And so it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened, but it did.
Wow.
And that experience, sitting across from an author at Frothy Monkey in Nashville and having her weep because she had shared a little bit about her book, and then this woman got a book deal with another publisher. It was like, I can't believe this has happened. But I've had two experiences like that. So I always tend to be more on the cautious side, like let a little bit of that dribble out there, but don't give the whole picture because you don't want to lose the book deal.
Yeah. Okay. John
Van Sloten, I see your hand. And actually, sorry, Rachel, you'll be next. John, go ahead.
To this point, I'm thinking about my last book and getting an email from Moody, and they're all panicking because some chunks in the book are very close to things that were published in a newspaper. And had I been paid for those pieces and the newspaper owned the rights to those articles, that was the problem they were worried about when they realized I was doing it pro bono and I had all the rights to it. So I think that's another thing to consider in terms of, sharing it freely probably wouldn't be problematic. But if you've sold even small pieces of it, it got a pretty urgent response from them. So
that's good. Did you have a question too, John?
No, just a comment.
Cool. Good to see.
No, that's helpful. I will say, sometimes for authors that are working on their proposals and maybe they don't have a platform or want to do social media or anything like that, we take the approach of like, we'll try to get published. And so if they take chunks of their book, I always recommend take a section of your book and then tailor it to that specific outlet. So it's still different enough, but you're getting at the theme so that you're known for those themes. But I will say like 99% of my clients are in the nonfiction space. And so that's even Callie, why I introduced you to Don, because you're working on a fiction book. And so I don't have as much experience in that world.
Yeah, and I think that's another area, Joy, where I encourage people, hey, look at opportunities to write an article, whether it's for Relevant Magazine or Relevant Online or whoever's out there. There's not a lot of Christian outlets, but find places where you can get your byline out there, and then just add that author of the forthcoming, so people know, oh, there's a book behind this person. Rachel, you had a question. Please unmute.
Yes, thank you, Don. Good to see you. And thank you, Joy. It's been so good to hear from you. I have a friend at Punchline and she speaks so highly of you. So it's so fun to get to meet you this way. So quick question, even on the lines of, like the platform, that's kind of the big thing that a lot of us here are like, but in light of publishing and all the things being the Wild Wild West, I kind of have, I've played with a lot of different strategies. I took some time off because of some life change, but since coming back, obviously a big thing is your platform, because it's a business, right? It's a business pitch. How safe is it? How much of a risk is it? But I'm also hearing a lot about, like emails are more, email addresses are honestly worth more than social media. And like, I have a small community, but like they're mighty. They are so mighty in their communities and influential. And
I don't know. I'm just wondering if you have a proposal that comes across your desk and you're like, man, I love them, but they wouldn't be a good pitch because of honestly like that business, ratio. What would be your number one like thing that you suggestion to them in order to get to a place where you feel like it's worth pitching to a publisher? Like, would it be, podcast or, email leads? Like there's a lot of different ways you can spend your time, I feel like, and you can just drown in all of them. So like, what would be like, man, if there were just one thing that you feel like would be just a wise way to work towards that goal, what would it be? Because it's kind of like a double-edged sword. You want to, have things online that are valuable, but social media has a shelf life of like 3 seconds. And then the things that are longer, podcasting and like the emails that you really can serve your community a little bit better with. How do you get the word out about those without also being online, like on the social media things? So I don't know. What are your thoughts? What are you seeing in the changing environments? Like, what would you recommend?
Yeah, I would say because the environment is always changing, what I tell people to do, because they're like, oh, should I be on Substack? Oh, should I be on Twitter? We don't have Twitter anymore, whatever, TikTok, all those things. I feel so old sometimes. And I always tell them, what I want you to do is find 10 communicators, more so probably authors, that you listen to and feel connected to. And then look at how, because I think it's easy to focus in on what we don't want to do, what freaks us out or feels like it's going to be a suck of our time and our soul. But I would say if you look at people who are in the same field, so they're writers or they're podcasters or whatever mediums you are performing in or writing in, and say like, I like that they're doing this, I'm drawn to them about this, and I feel like I would get the same amount of energy by doing this, and kind of see those themes that you're drawn to and what you feel like you have the bandwidth to do, and just focus in on 1 or 2 things. Don't try to do all things. I find that even for me, I've been approached, I'm sure you guys get like emails from people like, I see you have a business. We can help you grow, and I just like delete those immediately, because for me in this season of life of having 3 kids, every time I'm literally not listed anywhere as a literary agent. I don't even have a place where people can submit book proposals to me right now, because I have enough clients that I'm working with for me. I don't want, my mother always says, don't lose your peace. So as you're trying to find these things to go after, I find that the best way is to find these things that bring life to you, and then go really focus in on those. And like for me, I just like Instagram, but I don't do Instagram for my business. I have my business Instagram like landing sites, so handles, so we can tag things, but that's just to lead people to the website. I don't post, sometimes we post on our stories, but I don't actually have posts. And I've done that, and it's exhausting, and the reward is never worth the whatever that phrase is, But what I like to do is just my personal Instagram, because I like to keep my mom in America updated about what I'm doing. And occasionally I will talk about the work that I do. And whenever we ask people, how did you hear about Punchline? They will say Joy's Instagram. So I just found the thing that I like to do. I've now, just as a creative outlet, I've taken we had an email list, and that was getting so expensive through MailChimp. I don't know if any of you pay, a ton of money through MailChimp. And someone said, you should really try Substack for your emails. And it's also this great writing community. And so I had so many authors be like, what do you think of Substack? And I was just like, well, maybe I should just try it out, so that I actually have some informed responses to these authors who are saying, should we join this new thing of Substack? And I did. And now my newsletters are not really newsletters. It's just me blogging again. I haven't blogged since like 2010, and I love it. But it also leads to like, it's whatever, it leads to work, but it's me just doing what I enjoy. So that was a long way of answering your question, but I hope that helped.
No, I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. It's like, follow what's life-giving, and that's what we're made to do. And so it makes sense that God would use that to bring more of what we're supposed to do. So thank you.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And if you haven't followed Joy on Instagram, do so, because she has the cutest 3 little kids on the planet.
Who
truly.
will all sue me one day for putting their pictures all over.
Yes, I'm sure. Particularly Fern. I'm worried about her. But
Can see it
hey,
in her eyes.
Callie has a question. Go ahead, Callie.
Hey, Joy. Hey,
Hi.
okay. Curious about, with all your experience as a speaker agent, how should we be thinking about speaking opportunities? And do we need a speaker agent? And do we do speaking opportunities before the book release or only after? How do we think about that?
Yeah. Well, again, think about it if it's something you enjoy doing, you know, and if you haven't done it before, if it's something where you're just like, I would like to do this, but you know, nobody's asking me to come speak. That's different than having speaking requests all the time. So if you're starting and you want to speak to help bring momentum around the book or just your platform and things like that, I have kind of a template that I give to people I work with called the Ask. And it's thinking of 20, maybe 20 people in your life who are connectors and telling them, hey, I'm working on this book or I'm working on this keynote. And I really want to share with people like what I'm doing. And I feel like it has impact. And I've seen this impact when I've done XYZ, you know, have some level of data or if you have ever spoken, having a clip of you speaking and just say, but you know, in today's world, like there's so much noise, like I need connectors. So if you know of a business or a church or whatever is the audience that you're trying to get to, that you would be willing to make an introduction, it would mean the world to me. And here's what you could send them. So you make it so easy for people. But then the reality is there's so many people who are just natural connectors who want to do this. I was listening to something, I think it was Arthur C. Brooks, and he was saying, you build trust not by helping people, but by asking for help. And so if you've taken the time to go, hey, I thought of a handful of people in my life who are just natural connectors, and I'm making the ask from you. Like if you could think of one or two people or one or two businesses, and that will honor them. It is hard for us to do it, but put yourself in the other person's shoes. Someone that you know, that you love, that you get excited about coming to you and making that ask, but they're not going to do it if you don't plant the seed of like, hey, I'm trying this new thing. So that's one way. Then in terms of having a speaking agent or manager, this is really why I kind of, I would say, got over the speaking bureau side of Punchline, is because, you know, back in the day, you know, it used to be like, you know, a business or a church being like, who are the next great speakers out there? And they'd call the bureau and they'd have their Rolodex of speakers. But now everybody has their own website and their own platform. So the events know who they want to come speak. So they're looking to go to that. They're going to make the request through that person's site. So then whether that goes to an agency or it goes to someone who really knows you, it is really beneficial to have someone else communicate on your behalf. I think this is Joy's stats just from the many years I've negotiated speaking. This is not like I don't have any tried and true data, but just kind of like, it seems to be true. Just having someone else communicate on your behalf just raises kind of like even the price point that you could ask for your time. And you should be asking for money for your time after, if you've never spoken before, after you get some events under your belt. And one thing that I always tell people, if these connector friends have made connections for you and you go and you speak for free because you're trying to say, I want to work out this content or whatever it is, if you agree to speak for free, make sure that you have some level of exchange and say, I'm happy, I'm just getting started in my speaking career. I'm happy to come do this for free. All I would ask is, could you have someone there to film it for me? And then that's the payment. But now you're starting to get footage of speaking that, will help grow that. But I was even talking to someone who, the nice thing about living in Paris is people always come through Paris. And I was having dinner with a woman who books all the speakers for a very large university. And she was like, the people who I work with that are so wonderful, like the management companies for speakers, are when it's like for your dad, because I'm still managing my dad, or this person, her best friend manages her. And it's just like, they can answer all the questions. It's not this like, Now we have to go back and ask the speaker, but just someone who knows you really well. When I used to speak, I still did all the negotiations for myself, but I just sent the copy to someone that worked with me to send it on my behalf. It just kind of helps to have that buffer. And so if they know you that well that they can do it on your behalf, it's a nice thing to have.
And also collect those endorsements from those events, right? Like when you're
Yes.
speaking at an event, hey, would you give me an endorsement that I can use to get another gig somewhere else?
Exactly. Back to the marketing thing and just this phrase that my father taught me that I use all the time, and I think is such an important part of kind of relationship marketing. And as I say in my book, like relationship marketing is the best kind of marketing in this 21st century. But my dad always said, relationship determines response. And so you've just done that. You've done this for free for them. And so you just say, hey, could you just give me some feedback? Is there anything that I can share publicly? Like, don't forget to make those asks. I mean, we have these month-long writing cohorts. I almost don't want to do them because I hate having to tell people you have to, like, I hate having to promote it. So what we do is when we do one at the very end, we ask people to give an endorsement. So then somebody else can tell the world that it's so great. And we ask them, could you just tell one friend? And so they just kind of sustain, even though our community is not huge. I don't have some massive reach, but it's just that relationship determines response.
That subsequently becomes useful just in terms of whether you're an author that isn't speaking, but it also, those asks are good for influencers and endorsements down the line too. And I will say, to echo what you're saying, Joy, that why not ask? They can say no, but at least you've asked. You won't know until you do that. I see that our time is almost up. Last question for you, Joy, was what words of encouragement can you give writers that are on today's Zoom? Some are looking for their first project. I'm looking at you, Callie, and others are on their third or fourth project. I'm looking at you, John Van Sloten. So, yeah, what words of encouragement in English or French?
It's the only way I can do it. My children are here and they could speak fluently, but my advice and encouragement to you would be not to rush it. And I think most of you are Americans, and I just think it's something that I really notice, even just going to the UK versus France, or the UK and going to the US. There's an escalation of like intensity in our, it's just something in us. And I think because, as we said, the publishing industry is the wild, wild west, and there are so many different ways and things you can do, and 47 different marketing things and all that, we can just kind of lose focus on our why. So I talked about that earlier, just like, what's your why for getting this book out, and try to stay focused on that. And I think it's just my passion. The thing that I always tell my authors, if they've written one book and it's time for another one, I have so many that I don't have to hold their hand because I've been careful about who I vet to work with, but they are so eager to get on their next project and do their next thing. And I know some people want to make a career of writing, and that is something some people can do, but it's very difficult to do. And so I encourage you, if you can make this more of just like your life's passion and your creative outlet, we will actually get better stuff in the world because of all these different ways to publish and get your words out. There's just so much noise. And so I actually, and Don might be mad at me about this, but I do not recommend, if you get a multiple book offer from a publisher, that if you don't have an idea for that second or third book that they want to get you for, do not take it. That is why there is so much nonsense out there, because people get multiple book deals, they don't have an idea, and then they have a deadline and they scramble and they put something horrible out there.
Yeah.
So my passion is hold on to the craft of good writing, even if you're getting into writing because you are a speaker or a comedian or a podcaster and you're like, hey, I want to get this now into a book. Just still like have it be that like when you die, you're proud of the art that you put out there. So that's my final.
Bravo. You can appreciate this because you're in the land of Châteauneuf-du-Pape, but I always say to my authors, and some of you I'm sure have heard this, I am about fine wine and not Kool-Aid. And there's a lot of Kool-Aid on the shelves out there. And I'd rather have a good Bordeaux or Merlot or whatever. But yeah, I so echo what you're saying. Joy, it's always a pleasure. If you're ever in Colorado, bring your croissants with you. This is a little insight into their family. Do you have like croissants every Wednesday? Like there's a croissant day in the Reed family, isn't there?
Yeah, Croissant Wednesday. That's just like, that's the mandatory day. But like, we're not, I mean, there will be multiple times a week that we have them. I mean, they're like water here. It's again, regulations. They can't charge more than a certain amount for a baguette and a croissant. And it is my dream come true.
That's
So
awesome.
if any of you are in Paris and you want to reach out, I will. People always say, where's the best croissant? I say, I don't know. I mean, you could consult a blogger or something. I'm sure somebody says they know where the best croissant is, but I always say, go to a boulangerie in the morning or around 6:37 at night. That's when everyone's coming home. And that's when you can get the hottest baguettes and the hottest croissants. You just want the one that's just come out of the oven.
So true. So true. Joy, so much fun. Thank you everyone for joining today. And I wish you all the best the rest of the week. And again, Joy, always fun to see you and connect with you.
Same. Thank you, everyone.
Bye now.
Bye.
Thanks, that was awesome.